Hello, and welcome back to another piping hot edition of Out of Time Reviews. I'm Andrew Parker, senior writer and film critic for thegate.ca, back once again with another look at the latest titles to hit cinemas and streaming. And if you think I filmed this intro at the same time as the last episode, you would be absolutely right. This is kind of the second half of back-to-back episodes that are going up in quick succession due to some technical issues last week, but this one is a lot more current this time out. We'll look at 4 new offerings that really run a wide gamut. We'll start with a look at the limited documentary series Monsters of God, a look inside the roots of the exotic reptile trade from the director of Tiger King. Then it's off to the 16th century in Japan for renowned director Kiyoshi Kurosawa's epic The Samurai and the Prisoner. Then back to America for the feel-good documentary Cookie Queens about young girls slinging Thin Mints and the like. And finally, a rom-com vision of the future with Callum Turner and Monica Barbaro in one night only. Like, share, and subscribe if you feel so inclined, and now would be a great time to do so because I have a ton of stuff coming up in the very near future. But for now, let's begin with the matters at hand.
I'm married to these animals, but I'm most intimate with my king cobra.
I lusted after these animals. We were obsessed with reptiles.
It's a fucking addiction, dude.
We were rogues, and I was the king.
Now, how deadly is this king cobra?
Well, you would certainly die.
Jurassic Park made everyone want to have their own dinosaur in their house.
He wanted the most rare and unusual, no matter the consequences.
The American zoos would pay crazy prices, and they were all very competitive with each other. So I was able to exploit that.
I'd sell my soul.
Even though it was illegal, I fucking thrived.
Full disclosure, I'm not a snake person, and I'm only barely cool with other forms of reptiles. But documentary filmmaker and advocate Eric Goode is, and the HBO limited series Monsters of God has been his passion project for quite some time. A sprawling, historically minded deep dive into the big bucks that can be found in the illegal reptile trade, Monsters of God begins with the director of the likes of Tiger King and Chimp Crazy admitting that he was part of the problem for a long time. Goode was, and still very much is, a reptile person, and as the series makes very clear, reptile enthusiasts are a very different breed of pet owner. Goode admits that in his youth he purchased some rare and soon-to-become endangered reptiles that were illegally procured and sold by the kinds of disreputable sellers he profiles in his latest series. The show begins with a bit of an apology and becomes an impassioned call to action that hopes viewers and authorities pay closer attention to shady practices that go on to this day. Like Tiger King and Chimp Crazy, Monsters of God balances darkly comedic criminal exploits with a genuine sense of concern and disgust for the subject matter at hand, so much so that it's no surprise that the series is co-produced by A24 and Josh Safdie. Only this time, there's a lot more players involved to discuss, both on the legal and illegal sides of the reptile trade, and many of them are a lot more dangerous and unhinged than some of Goode's previous subjects. Monsters of God builds like it's constructing a family tree of illegal animal smuggling, beginning with a look at Hank Molt, the founder of the Philadelphia Reptile Exchange, who's often seen as ground zero for the reptile smuggling trade, and his former partner turned bitter enemy Tommy Crutchfield, who filled the void when Hank went to prison and dropped out of the spotlight, becoming in his own eyes the worst criminal offender out there when it came to trafficking these animals. Their exploits begat other smugglers, including a large-scale operation run by the Van Nostrand family in Florida that would also collude with the largest smuggler in Asia and a high-rolling, much-feared Miami drug kingpin. The reptile smuggling community is a wide-reaching one, but also deeply incestuous and filled with double-crosses, backstabs, and people getting thrown under the bus, both rightfully and somewhat wrongly. Monsters of God isn't a show about good people. Even the police and wildlife enforcement officers being profiled as the counter-argument here don't come across as being altogether balanced human beings. Their outlandishness and reckless disregard for the law makes for some great anecdotes about huge sales and near misses, but the laughs that the viewer gets here are short-lived, with Goode immediately snapping back into a setting to remind us that this kind of stuff is funny in the moment, but not amusing for the animals or people who are caught up in this line of work. Based on Brian Christie's book The Lizard King, with the author appearing frequently throughout as an interview subject and sometimes guide for good, Monsters of God exposes the kind of avarice that's rooted in the capitalistic vision of the American dream, and the belief that if someone wants something bad enough, they should be allowed to own it. This belief that animals are put on this world to amuse human beings, not live out their lives in peace and solitude. And on top of that, these bad actors believe that if someone out there wants it bad enough and is willing to pay the price, they should be allowed to make a business out of it. While there are punishments in place, and the Endangered Species Act of 1973 was supposed to put a stop to this sort of enterprise, sentences and fines for getting caught or slaps on the wrist for people like these who have plenty of cash, connections, and a cadre of workers who could pick up the slack in their absence, there's absolutely no incentive for them to stop. Nor would they want to, as Good shows how reptile owners like these are driven in part by a sort of addiction to the species. It's not just the money that's alluring, but the ability to collect these animals as if they were Pokemon. It's the ability to procure animals that were once thought impossible to obtain outside of their native countries. It gives people like Molt, Crutchfield, and the Van Nostrans a rush, and while what they are doing is illegal and the animals are often treated terribly, especially in Molt's case, they fuel their own need to be around these creatures. And it's that search for the impossible that made these smugglers somewhat mainstream, with many of them selling their ill-gotten reptiles to some of America's most well-known and respected zoos. As the popularity of reptiles as pets boomed in the early 70s and again with the release of Jurassic Park in the 90s, so too did the desire of these institutions to have their own collections of rare species during a time when these places weren't seen as much as places of conservation that they are today, but more as tourist attractions not far removed from the kinds of big cat parks Good documented in the likes of Tiger King. Monsters of God is as riveting as it is depressing, even if sometimes it's hard to keep all of the moving pieces and players in mind between episodes. There's a lot going on here, but Good's work is thorough and nuanced, which is probably why he spent longer working on this than any of his other previously released projects. A lot of legwork has to be done in order for Good to talk to and profile the biggest players in this game, and in terms of comprehensiveness, there's nothing else out there at the moment that covers this subject better. And by the final episode, it becomes clear just how personal this series is to Good and why it's so important on the whole. Monsters of God gets an 8 out of 10. It can be hard to watch at times if you're an animal lover, but as a call to action and documenting of a large-scale criminal enterprise that has operated almost out in the open for decades, it's indispensable.
何の用だ。今織田と戦えば天下分け目となりましょう。そうか。お主も足を口説きに来たか。今この時この城にやってきたことを不運と思え。その織田がいよいよ有岡城の司法を包囲する気配を見せておるぞ。わしを信じろ。有岡城の敵を信じろ。
Versatile filmmaker Kiyoshi Kurosawa delivers a classically indebted epic with The Samurai and the Prisoner. The career of Kurosawa includes horror movie classics like Cure and Pulse, sumptuous dramas like Tokyo Sonata and Wife of a Spy, and harder to classify genre experiments like Creepy and Before We Vanish. He's an auteur with distinct sensibilities and skills, but he also boasts a well-rounded filmography that reads like the works of a journeyman director. He can quite literally do it all, and The Samurai and the Prisoner is another unique example of his many talents and styles. Like many of his best works, it's unlike anything he's attempted before, and it's approached with a calculated degree of thought and care that makes it feel like this is all second nature for him. He continues to be one of my favorite filmmakers of all time, and this film is a great example why. In Setsu, Japan, at the start of the year 1578, a lord prepares to defend his castle from encroaching military forces. Lord Murashige, played by Masahiro Motoki, keeps his troops in a ready state of preparedness as the forces of tyrannical warlord Oda draw closer and closer to the gates of a rocky castle. One day in winter, Kanbei Kuroda, an emissary of Oda's, played by Masaki Suda, comes bearing warning. Instead of beheading or crucifying one of Oda's men as per samurai tradition, the peace-preferring Murashige imprisons Kanbei in his dungeon. Kanbei would rather be dead, knowing that his failure to return to Oda will put his child's life in danger. Not long after Kanbei is imprisoned, though, a series of odd deaths and occurrences begin happening around the castle. Someone is felled by a seemingly impossible arrow shot, some severed heads of unknown origin hide a dark secret, the transport of a priceless tea kettle leads to the deaths of both a master swordsman and a priest. Murashige investigates these crimes, but will eventually need help from the analytical mind of the prisoner being kept in the dungeon. With The Samurai and the Prisoner, Kurosawa accomplishes many different goals at once. As a procedural, the film has the spirit of a great detective yarn, with Murashige trying to piece together the details of a crime before a grand reveal, one crime for each season the story unfolds across. This element of The Samurai and the Prisoner does make Kurosawa's latest feel a bit episodic at times, with really only the summer and fall segments bleeding over into one another, but all of the segments themselves are interesting, and the whole thing is ultimately going somewhere emotionally revelatory. The ultimate thread that will tie everything together isn't all that shocking of a reveal, and it becomes more easily predicted as the film progresses, but the justification behind why all this is happening to Murashige is quite profound and well-reasoned. As the significance behind Kanbei's capture comes into sharper focus, so too does the price of the war being waged outside the castle walls. There are many moments within The Samurai and the Prisoner where Kurosawa is able to recall the style and tenor of classic Japanese samurai cinema. There are slow-burning moments of high drama and even a large-scale battle sequence that has a surprising amount of grandeur and detail for a film that's otherwise confined to a small handful of locations. None of these kinds of scenes are things that can be found anywhere else in Kurosawa's filmography, meaning that he has somehow found another way to marry his skill set to another different genre. Throughout his career, Kurosawa has proven to be a master of light and shadows, particularly in his horror and thriller efforts, but without even needing to tweak anything, he's able to create near-identical staging that wouldn't look different from the kinds of movies being produced in Japan during the 1950s and 60s. It's quite a remarkable visual achievement, and Kurosawa is able to make even the most muted of colors pop on screen. Kurosawa's screenplay, based on the novel by Hanobu Yonezawa, is built upon carefully parsed conversations and tics that allow the performers to dial in their performances perfectly. There's just enough in every line of dialogue to tell whether someone is telling the truth or lying. Similarly, the script allows both Motoki and Suda the chance to play things mostly cool on the surface, and some choice moments that allow their masks of composure to slip and crack. For the actors, this is a script that gives back to them in bulk, with plenty to pull from and parse along the way. It's the kind of thoughtful, accessible, adult-minded drama that no one is making much of anywhere in the world anymore, let alone in Japan. Material also has underused, unique historical undercurrent that bridges Japan's past with its present. Murashige, who holds true to his belief that killing is senseless and meaningless, exists in a cultural space torn between samurai ideals, the Buddhist belief in karma, and the rise of Christianity in the region. The way he conducts himself pulls from all three backgrounds, and much of his stresses come from the disagreements over what is the one true way and path. As evidenced in the film, sometimes in both the literal and metaphorical fog of war, the lines between schools of thought become blurry and no clear path presents itself. Beliefs begin to overlap, and unexplainable occurrences can be viewed either as karmic payback or divine providence, with both seemingly similar reasonings holding different cultural meanings. It's a fascinating time period in which to set a story, especially a mystery, making for a narratively richer experience all around. The Samurai and the Prisoner isn't quite up there with Kurosawa's all-time best, but it comes pretty darn close. The story being cordoned off into distinct sections makes for a few odd jumps in pacing, and it's not always difficult to spot any traitors or dissenters in their midst. But everything else here is so rich that it feels like classic cinematic comfort food. If you miss these kinds of works of world cinema, The Samurai and the Prisoner is the movie you've been waiting for. I'm giving it an 8 out of 10. It's as cozy as sitting down with your favorite book or pulling a classic movie off the shelf. In terms of tone, performance, writing, and direction, this is as good as movies get.
Does everyone know what upselling means? Okay. Guess what? It's Girl Scout cookie season! When you're selling Girl Scout cookies, you have to set your goals. My sister went to Europe, and that's where I'm going to.
Very good salesperson, Olive.
Oh, I'd like to be a Supreme Court justice.
Oh.
Every Girl Scout makes a goal and tries to accomplish it or go past it. Ah! Ow, that hurt. My goal is to get strong enough to pull that big wagon. Chugga, 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 chugga.
Alyssa Namias' Cookie Queens is a documentary that's more about entertainment value than informational value, and when talked about and viewed through that lens, it's a pretty good movie. It's the kind of movie that could entice younger viewers to watch more documentaries in the future, and that certainly isn't a bad thing. The cynical adult in me questions some of the narrative and editorial choices made in Cookie Queens, but the part of me that likes to be entertained by a feel-good story every now and then thinks this is delightful. Cookie Queens follows 4 young girls from different parts of the United States as they try to raise money for their Girl Scout troops by joining in on the organization's ubiquitous and traditional yearly cookie selling campaign, an effort that nets the organization upwards of $800 million a year. 12-year-old Olive from North Carolina has consistently put up record-breaking sales numbers, but she's starting to grow weary of her parents' pressure and has grown hip to just how little of that money of those sales goes back into the troop itself. 8-year-old Shannon Elizabeth from El Paso is a martial arts enthusiast with a strong mindset and a family that wonders if it could take the financial hit if she doesn't meet her sales goals. 9-year-old Nikki from Chino, California wants to follow in the footsteps of her older sisters, who are some of the best sellers in the state. And precious 5-year-old Ara from San Diego has very modest goals and a desire to build stronger character. The tension in Cookie Queens comes mostly from the fact that Girl Scouts have to buy their supply of cookies in advance, and if the goals set by the Scouts themselves aren't met, the families are on the hook for the cost. Nahimas includes updates on the participants' tallies, but with the exception of Shannon Elizabeth's family, none of them seem like they have many financial burdens or concerns. In the cases of Olive and Nikki, success is certain because they're constantly hovering and coaching parents will absolutely make sure that their kids work themselves to the bone selling the cookies. In the case of young Ara, it just seems nice that she wants to be noticed by people while she strolls the beach with her wagon full of cookies. And even in the tensest of timelines, things wrap up rather curiously. That kind of curiousness permeates the rest of Cookie Queens, making one question just how true of a documentary this really is. Nahimas looks like she wants to say something about the corporatization of the Girl Scouts at times, but any real criticism cuts short, probably because without the organization's participation and authorization, there wouldn't be much of a movie. Some developments along the way feel rather convenient, and others like they've been staged to make a cuter, funnier, or more dramatic impact. The cinematography from Antonio Cisneros is also gorgeous, but that's when you have to question these kinds of narrative-leaning documentaries the most. Some of the shots in Cookie Queens look too stunningly composed for them to be captured on the fly. But putting all of that out of sight and mind for a minute, Cookie Queens does follow a dynamic group of kids worth rooting for. It's easy to get invested in Olivia's smarts, Nikki's wide-eyed optimism, Shannon Elizabeth's tenacity, and Ara's irrepressible spirit. Whether they're seasoned pros who've mastered the art of social media or doggedly determined salespeople willing to grind it out during all of their free time away from school, Cookie Queens captures the essence of its subjects nicely and in an entertaining fashion. I could go on a tangent about how this film can be viewed as an ode to capitalism more so than it's a movie about learning life skills and entrepreneurship, but that's a criticism coming from a viewer who's not in the core demographic that I think this is aimed at. I'm going to give this a 6 out of 10 and suggest that it works better for younger viewers who want to know what documentaries are but aren't savvy to storytelling methods within the genre just yet, or adults that just want something breezy to watch. It's lightweight but effective feel-good entertainment. What a strange movie this is. One Night Only is a high-concept romantic comedy set in a world where sex has been outlawed for single people except for one night of the year like it's The Purge, and people seem to have a lot of thoughts about this one, most of them not so complimentary. Overall, I thought One Night Only was a funny movie with a lot of genuine laughs, but also a complete mess from a conceptual and structural standpoint, and a film that's as predictable as any other rom-com that isn't saddled with such a ridiculous premise. I moderately enjoyed myself because I did laugh quite a bit, but I always knew I was looking at a movie that was kinda clueless in every other respect. One Night Only follows the parallel and intersecting stories of Owen, played by Callum Turner, and Allie, played by Monica Barbaro, as they navigate the horny streets of New York City from 7 p.m. on August 7th to 7 a.m. the next morning. Owen, the humble owner of a pizza joint, wants to use this night to have a romantic dinner with his long-term girlfriend, played by Maya Hawke, and propose marriage. But he's blindsided when she says she wants to try sleeping with someone else that night. Allie, a singer with stage fright who's been reduced to remaking classical pop songs as jingles for commercials, is looking to smash, but she wants a deeper connection with someone as she's still pining for the dude she hooked up with last year that ghosted her the next day. Several times over the course of a chaotic evening where Owen is attempting to put himself back out there and numb the pain of his apparent rejection, they cross paths, both as adversaries and accomplices, all the while the audience can tell that they should just be hooking up with each other and just be done with it if that's all this night in this movie is going to be about. Directed by Will Gluck, who made Easy A, Friends with Benefits, and Anyone But You, and scripted by Travis Braun, whose experience lies mainly in children's television, One Night Only is the kind of movie that tries to throw as many rapid-fire jokes and doe-eyed looks in front of the audience with hopes that they don't ask any big questions about the core concept or how quickly things have to move along. There are zingers, one-liners, and cameos aplenty throughout, but they're more funny in spite of the fact that the situation doesn't make much sense. To keep single people in line, everyone is outfitted with a biosensor that can alert the police to any kind of fornicating outside of a traditional marriage, or if people aren't using condoms, and in a few shots, eagle-eyed viewers can kinda sorta make out posters that show what displays of affection are illegal and which aren't, but that's still not enough for One Night Only to hold much water. The gimmick here is kind of like that set of rules that govern the Gremlins. Once you pick at a thread a little bit, your suspension of disbelief is shattered. If you just accept everything at face value, then you can go for the ride, or so the filmmakers hope. The thinness of the premise leaves the character development and satirical weight within One Night Only at a severe disadvantage. Outside of being humorously introduced to our attractive protagonists, these people are more joke delivery services than real people. We don't know enough about either Owen or Allie to especially care what happens to them on this night. We know a bit about Owen's family life because we get to meet his mother, played by Molly Ringwald, and Mom's lover, played hilariously by LeVar Burton, who's relishing the chance to play against his squeaky clean image. We know what Allie would love to do for a living and the types of guys she's into, and that's about it. It's not really enough to care, and no amount of charm, chemistry, or comedic timing displayed by Turner and Barbaro can mask the shallowness of the material. When it comes to satire, One Night Only also blows the chance to lean further into its messaging about the rise of the religious right, loss of human rights, and misuse of the police. I've seen a lot of criticism out there, some of it quite good and impassioned, saying that One Night Only is actually condoning the actions of the oppressors the characters seem to be fighting against. Thinking back on Gluck's career as a filmmaker thus far, I don't think that's the case at all. In fact, Easy A, which is a much, much better movie than this, has a similarly messy progressive streak where not much is explained about its politics, except that it does veer more pronouncedly towards the left. Here, like everything else in the story, things are left deliberately vague for the sake of making a joke that can be easily understood by a mass audience. Nothing in One Night Only is much of a thinker, and when you refuse to get more specific, that's where high concepts fall apart and all sense of meaning is lost. I think that One Night Only knows what it wants to say, but it always stops short of saying it. As such, One Night Only devolves quickly into a movie that's full of set pieces, some clever, some dragging, some not funny at all designed to pull the leads apart before bringing them back together again. The best of these moments involves Owen and Allie attempting to procure what may be the last condom for sale in all of New York, and the worst one finding Owen getting robbed by a sex worker. Both the best and worst scenes raise so many questions in the viewer's mind that don't hold up to any scrutiny. Why did no one plan for such a huge run on condoms? Why didn't Durex, whose product placement throughout is omnipresent, question how their company would look for not making enough product? Why do both of these scenes easily lend themselves to better punchlines the viewer could think up instead of the ones offered by the movie itself? Why is any of this happening? Well, it's happening because someone involved with the production thought these bits would be funny, and for no other reason than that. And most of this might be more excusable if the script wasn't so blatantly predictable. The outcome of One Night Only can be guessed by almost anyone before they even buy a ticket, and I'm willing to bet that at least 75% of the people watching this can guess precisely what's going to happen. But beyond even that bit of predictability, this is a movie where the trajectory of every scene can be predicted the second it starts. The only real joy here comes from some quick-witted banter and the admirably gamed performances within the margins that feel like they've been laid down with barbed wire. Did someone think that the concept would be so much for audiences to handle that they needed to ensure everything else around it was so overly familiar? There's a much better movie inside of One Night Only, but no one really bothered to think about how to free it from captivity. Barbaro, Turner, and the rest of the cast are fun to watch and elevate the movie admirably through sheer force of will. The New York scenery is squeaky clean, but nice enough for a romance like this. With the exception of one cameoing performer who's really only there to explain how the bioimplants work, most of the appearances that happen in the blink of an eye are amusing, and occasionally Gluck lucks into some genuine belly laughs that make the viewer wonder if this whole thing could turn a corner at some point. It doesn't, and strangely, this might have been the most I've laughed at a movie that I didn't think was very good. I'm giving it a 5 out of 10. I laughed and I admire the things that work, but this movie is a mess that either wasn't thought through enough before it went to camera, or it had too much cut from it along the way. Whatever the case, the final results are disappointing. And that's it for now. What did you think of any of the things I talked about this week? Let me know in the comments section below. Like, share, and subscribe to stay up to date on what I have going on. I hope you had a great week. Hope the next one's even better, and hope to see you back here again. Take care of yourselves and each other.